I thought I understood my life, my family, and the love around me, but I was completely wrong. And the scariest part is I didn't even know it. It didn't start with shouting or fights. It started with strange silences, fake smiles, and moments that felt just a little too quiet to be normal. I kept telling myself I was imagining things, that I was just tired, just sensitive, just overthinking. But deep down, my heart was screaming that something wasn't right. And when I finally saw what they were hiding from me, it wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, it was quiet. And that somehow made it 10 times more terrifying. Nobody ever warns you about the quiet moment when your life starts to crack without a sound. And for me, it wasn't some loud argument or dramatic scene. It was a normal evening where I stood in my kitchen staring at the sink full of dishes while the world outside felt strangely still. And I remember feeling this heavy, uncomfortable pressure in my chest, like my heart was trying to send me a message my ears couldn't hear yet. And everything in the house looked the same, but felt completely different. Like the air had picked up a secret and refused to tell me what it was. And at first, I brushed it off because that's what you do when you don't want your life to fall apart. You make excuses. You say you're tired. You say you're stressed. You say it's just another bad day. But the feeling didn't go away. It sat with me, followed me into the bedroom, climbed into my thoughts while I tried to sleep. And I found myself staring at the ceiling in the dark, wondering when I became the person who felt nervous in their own home. And that's when I started noticing tiny things that I had never questioned before, like the way conversations seemed to quietly die when I entered a room, or the way certain smiles looked practiced instead of real, or the way silence suddenly felt louder than any words could ever be. And that's the part nobody tells you about. How silence can feel like someone pressing their hand over your mouth without touching you. And I could feel it happening, but I still didn't want to believe it because believing it would mean that the people I trusted most might be hiding something from me. And that idea hurt more than I was ready for. So I told myself I was overthinking. I told myself I was being dramatic. I told myself to just breathe and move on. But deep down, my gut kept whispering that something was wrong. And that whisper kept getting louder every single day. And I started walking around my own house feeling like I didn't fully belong there anymore. Like I was walking through memories instead of reality. And there was this moment where I caught my reflection in the dark window, and I didn't even recognize the person staring back because they looked confused, lost, and slightly scared. And I remember thinking, what happened to my life? But I had no answer, only a feeling, only a shadow, only this strange sense that I was standing at the edge of a story I didn't ask to be part of. And the scariest part of all was that I could feel something coming, but I had no idea what it was, no idea who was behind it, no idea how long it had been happening. And I wish I could say that feeling stopped there. I wish I could say I ignored it and everything went back to normal. But the truth is, that soft warning was real. And it was just the beginning. Because the next thing that happened wasn't a feeling, it was proof. And once you start seeing proof, you can never go back to being blind.
And what I noticed next changed everything I thought I knew about the people around me. And it all started with just tiny things that nobody ever thought I would notice.
At first, I tried to play it cool. Like maybe I was tripping or just overthinking stuff the way you do when life feels off. But the truth is, once that weird feeling sunk in, I couldn't unsee the little cracks that kept showing up everywhere I looked. And it started with the dumb little things you normally ignore, like how people would flip their phones over real quick when I walked by, or how the vibe in the room would straight up die the second I stepped inside, like somebody cut the music mid-song. And I remember joking about it once, like, dang, y'all talking about me or what? And everybody laughed, but it wasn't that real laugh. It was that thin, fake, feel the silence type of laugh that don't reach nobody's eyes. And that's when it hit me that I wasn't crazy. I wasn't imagining stuff. Something was really going on behind my back. And the more I tried to ignore it, the louder it got. Like the universe kept tapping me on the shoulder saying, "Open your eyes." And everywhere I went, I felt like I walked into rooms already filled with secrets. Like I was the only one not in on the joke. And it messed with my head more than I want to admit. Because you start wondering if you're the problem. If maybe you did something wrong. If maybe you just hard to be around. And that thought right there can eat you alive if you let it. And I started moving different, talking less, watching more, studying people's faces like they were puzzles I had to solve. And let me tell you folks, can lie with their mouth, but they eyes tell the whole story. And every time someone looked away too fast or paused too long before answering me, it felt like another little crack in the wall of trust breaking open. And I started catching patterns too, like who would suddenly go quiet together, who would leave the room together, who would act normal when it was just me and them, but different when others were around. And it felt like living inside some low-budget suspense movie where the main character don't even realize they in danger yet. And the crazy part is, I didn't even want drama. I wanted peace. I wanted simple. I wanted real. But instead, I got silence and side eyes and fake smiles. And even the walls started feeling like they were holding secrets I wasn't supposed to hear. And I lay in bed at night just staring at the ceiling like, man, what's really going on in my own house? And I hated feeling like I had to protect my heart from the very people I used to trust with it. And the worst part was, I still didn't have proof. Just vibes, just gut feelings, just broken energy. And that'll mess you up, 'cause you feel crazy without having receipts. And I kept thinking maybe one day I wake up and it'll all be back to normal, like nothing ever happened. But nah, life don't work like that. 'Cause before I even had time to process any of this, I stumbled onto something I wasn't never meant to see. And what I found ain't just shake me, it flipped my whole world upside down. I swear, the moment it finally happened, it didn't feel like no movie scene or dramatic slow motion. It felt like my soul got punched straight in the chest while the rest of the world just kept moving like nothing was wrong. And it was one of them regular, boring days where nothing special was supposed to happen. But life don't care about your plans. It don't care what you're ready for. It just hits you when you least expect it. And I wasn't even looking for trouble. Wasn't snooping around. Wasn't trying to expose nobody. I just opened up a drawer looking for something simple, and that's when I saw it. Something that didn't belong there. Something that stopped my breathing like somebody knocked the air clean out of my lungs. And at first I tried to laugh it off like, nah, this can't be what I think it is. But the more I stared at it, the more my hands started shaking and my heart started beating so loud I could hear it in my ears. and ain't nobody around. No music, no noise, just silence, and my thoughts going crazy. And I felt sick to my stomach, like I was about to pass out. And that's when it really hit me that I had just stepped into a truth I wasn't ready for. And the worst part wasn't even what I found, it was what it meant. It meant I wasn't crazy. I wasn't imagining anything. I wasn't tripping after all. This was real. This was happening. And my mind started running fast, connecting dots from old conversations, old awkward silences, old weird looks, and everything started lining up like a puzzle, finally snapping into place. And right when I thought it couldn't get any worse, I realized the person behind it wasn't some random enemy, wasn't some outsider, wasn't some stranger trying to mess up my life. Nah, it was somebody I loved, somebody I defended, somebody I would have taken a bullet for without even thinking twice. And that realization felt like somebody poured ice water down my spine. 'Cause betrayal hit different when it comes from your own people. And I just sat there staring at the evidence like, how long y'all been playing me like this? And my whole body felt weak. My legs felt shaky. And I had to sit down because I thought I was going to collapse right there on the floor. And I wanted to scream. I wanted to flip tables. I wanted to run out and confront somebody. But I didn't. I just stayed quiet. Because when shock hits you real hard, it don't always make you loud. Sometimes it makes you silent and dangerous. And I started realizing that everything I thought I knew about my life might be a lie. And that thought don't just hurt, it changes you. And what messed me up the most was knowing that this wasn't just a mistake. It was planned. It was intentional. It was happening while I was smiling and trusting and loving like a fool. And that thought alone sat heavy in my chest like a weight that wouldn't lift. And I sat there asking myself if I should expose it, if I should pretend I didn't see it, if I should just walk away from everything. And right when I thought that was the worst part, I realized something even scarier. I wasn't the only one who might know the truth. And the way they started acting after that made me realize I wasn't as alone in this mess as I thought. After I saw what I wasn't never supposed to see, I stopped walking through my own life the same way. 'Cause once truth touches your eyes, even a little bit, you can't just go back to acting normal no more. And I tried. I really did. I tried to laugh like nothing happened, tried to eat at the same table like nothing changed, tried to sit through conversations and pretend my head wasn't spinning. But the whole world started feeling like one big fake stage, and everybody around me started looking like actors reading from a script I didn't get a copy of. And the wild part is, they didn't know I knew. So they kept moving the same, smiling the same, lying the same. And I was sitting there with all this knowledge burning up in my chest, trying to keep my face straight like I wasn't breaking on the inside. And I started noticing how fake smiles really look when you know the truth. They don't hit the eyes. They don't reach the soul. They just sit there like a mask. And every time someone asked me, "You good?" I wanted to laugh, 'cause how you supposed to answer that when your whole world just flipped upside down? And I started playing this little game in my head where I test people without letting them know I was testing them, dropping tiny hints, asking simple questions, watching how fast their body language changed. And people think they slick, but fear show itself real easy when you know what to look for. And I started catching shaky hands, sudden coughs, nervous laughs, long pauses, and all them little signs that someone got something to hide. And the more I watched, the more I realized this wasn't just one person involved. It felt bigger.
It felt organized. It felt planned out, like something that had been building behind my back for a long time. And that thought made my stomach twist, 'cause betrayal from one person hurt, but betrayal from a whole circle, that hits different. That hits like lonely mixed with shock, mixed with straight up disbelief. And I'd sit by myself sometimes, just staring at the wall, thinking about how much of my life was real and how much was fake. And that question right there don't got an easy answer when your trust is shattered. And I stopped talking as much, stopped sharing my thoughts, stopped opening my heart the way I used to, 'cause now I knew everybody wasn't safe. And it messes you up when you got to start protecting your spirit from people who once felt like home. And every night, I lay in bed with my mind running like a broken engine, replaying every weird moment I ever brushed off. And now they all made sense. Every pause, every silence, every flipped phone, every fake smile. And I started asking myself how far this really went, how deep it really was. And that's when I noticed something even crazier. The energy around me started changing more, like they could feel something shifted, like they sensed I wasn't blind no more. And right when I thought I could handle it, I realized I wasn't the only one watching anymore. And someone else started watching me too.
That's when I realized this wasn't just about broken trust no more. This wasn't just about hurt feelings and fake smiles. This thing had teeth. It had shadows. It had real weight behind it. And you can feel it when something turned dangerous. You don't gotta see it. You don't gotta hear it. Your body just knows. And from that point on, I started waking up with my chest tight before I even opened my eyes, like my soul was preparing itself for battle before my brain caught up. And every step I took inside that house felt heavier, like the floor was listening, like the walls were listening, like even the air was paying attention to my moves. And I started noticing new things. Not just the old patterns, but new behavior, forced kindness, random questions about where I was going, what I was doing, who I was talking to. And it felt less like concern and more like surveillance. And that's a crazy feeling. Realizing the people you once trusted now sound like they trying to track your every move. And I started changing how I did things, not to run, but to protect myself, taking different paths through the house, moving quieter, listening harder, watching reflections in mirrors and windows like they were security cameras. And I found myself standing still just to see who moved when I moved. And it sounds wild, but when your gut stays screaming, you learn to listen. And I wasn't scared, not like panic scared, but alert scared, like an animal that knows predators are nearby, even when it can't see them yet. And I started realizing the conversations weren't just about me anymore. They were around me, about situations, about timing, about things that felt way bigger than simple lies. And that's when the thought entered my head that made my hand shake. What if this wasn't just betrayal? What if this was something planned, something organized, something that started way before I even noticed? And that thought changed everything. 'Cause once you realize you might be in the middle of something bigger than yourself, you stop thinking like a regular person and start thinking like someone who's gotta survive. And I stopped trusting any room that felt too quiet, any smile that felt too wide, any kindness that came out of nowhere. And I started saving important thoughts in my head instead of saying them out loud. Started keeping mental notes like a diary only I could read. And I became careful, real careful.
And the weirdest part was the calmer I acted on the outside, the more chaotic everything felt on the inside. And I'd sit on my bed late at night, staring at the wall, thinking, how did my life turn into something this dense without anybody warning me? And then just when I thought I'd learned how to move safely inside the mess, I overheard something that made my blood run cold. Something that told me the story was a lot darker than I ever imagined. That's when I realized this wasn't just about broken trust no more. This wasn't just about hurt feelings and fake smiles. This thing had teeth. It had shadows. It had real weight behind it. And you can feel it when something turned dangerous. You don't gotta see it. You don't gotta hear it. Your body just knows. And from that point on, I started waking up with my chest tight before I even opened my eyes, like my soul was preparing itself for battle before my brain caught up. And every step I took inside that house felt heavier, like the floor was listening, like the walls were listening, like even the air was paying attention to my moves. And I started noticing new things, not just the old patterns, but new behavior, forced kindness, random questions about where I was going, what I was doing, who I was talking to. And it felt less like concern and more like surveillance. And that's a crazy feeling. Realizing the people you once trusted now sound like they trying to track your every move. And I started changing how I did things. Not to run, but to protect myself. Taking different paths through the house. Moving quieter. Listening harder. Watching reflections in mirrors and windows like they were security cameras. And I found myself standing still just to see who moved when I moved. And it sounds wild, but when your gut stays screaming, you learn to listen. And I wasn't scared, not like panic scared, but alert scared. Like an animal that knows predators are nearby, even when it can't see them yet. And I started realizing the conversations weren't just about me anymore. They were around me, about situations, about timing, about things that felt way bigger than simple lies. And that's when the thought entered my head that made my hand shake. What if this wasn't just betrayal? What if this was something planned, something organized, something that started way before I even noticed? And that thought changed everything. 'Cause once you realize you might be in the middle of something bigger than yourself, you stop thinking like a regular person and start thinking like someone who's gotta survive. And I stopped trusting any room that felt too quiet, any smile that felt too wide, any kindness that came out of nowhere. And I started saving important thoughts in my head instead of saying them out loud. Started keeping mental notes like a diary only I could read. And I became careful, real careful. And the weirdest part was the calmer I acted on the outside, the more chaotic everything felt on the inside. And I'd sit on my bed late at night, staring at the wall, thinking, how did my life turn into something this dense without anybody warning me? And then just when I thought I'd learned how to move safely inside the mess, I overheard something that made my blood run cold. Something that told me the story was a lot darker than I ever imagined. It happened late one night. The kind of quiet that makes every tiny sound feel 10 times louder. And I wasn't even trying to snoop, wasn't trying to listen in. I was just walking past the hallway when I heard my name come out of someone's mouth in that low, careful tone people use when they talking about stuff they don't want nobody else to hear. And I froze, like my feet grew roots into the floor, 'Cause it ain't normal to hear your own name whispered like it's dangerous. And my heart started hammering so hard I thought the walls could hear it. And I leaned just a little closer, not even stepping forward, just letting my ears do the work. And I heard enough to make my whole body go cold. Not full sentences, not full explanations, just broken phrases. He can't find out. We gotta be careful. Not yet. And when you put those pieces together in your head, it don't take a genius to know you standing in the middle of something you wasn't supposed to hear. And I backed away slow, real slow, like I didn't want to wake up the hair around me. And I went back to my room and shut the door and just sat there on the edge of the bed with my hands shaking, trying to understand what I just heard. And the worst part wasn't even fear. It was confirmation. I finally knew I wasn't crazy. I finally knew my gut wasn't lying to me. But at the same time, knowing makes everything way heavier. And from that moment on, I started treating every conversation like a test, every smile like a mask, every laugh like a distraction. And I learned to speak less and listen way more. 'Cause people always reveal themselves when they think they safe. And I started seeing fear hiding behind their eyes now. Not just confusion, not just awkwardness, but real fear. Like they were scared of what I might find out. And that feeling gave me a strange kind of strength. Because when somebody's scared of you finding the truth, that means you close, real close. And I started replaying that whisper in my head over and over like a broken record, trying to imagine what not yet really meant. What could be so serious that timing mattered, and what exactly would happen if I found out too soon. And that thought alone made my stomach twist, 'cause it made me feel like I wasn't just living in a secret anymore, I was living on borrowed time. And I started asking myself questions I never thought I'd have to ask. Like, who can I really trust? Who's really on my side? And who's only playing nice to keep me calm? And it was exhausting carrying that kind of weight while pretending to be normal, going through daily life like nothing was wrong when everything inside you is screaming that danger is close. And I don't mean danger like movies and chaos. I mean the quiet kind, the kind that sits at dinner tables and smiles at you like family. And just when I thought I understood the situation, just when I thought I had gathered enough in my head to make sense of it all, I realized there was one piece of the puzzle still missing. And that missing piece was the most important one of all. That missing piece hit me when I wasn't even looking for it. And honestly, that's how the worst truths always show up. They don't knock. They don't warn you. They just fall right into your lap when your guard is halfway down. And I was standing there one afternoon doing something normal, something dumb, something I'd done 100 times before when I heard a name that wasn't supposed to be linked to any of this mess. And that name rolled through the air like thunder inside my chest because it tied everything together in a way my brain didn't want to accept. And suddenly my hands felt cold, my shoulders felt tight, and my thoughts started spinning all over again. Because now the story wasn't just about secrets. It wasn't just about betrayal. It was about history, connections, things that started long before I ever noticed anything was wrong. And that realization messed me up in a quiet way, like the kind of pain you feel deep in your bones. And I started thinking back to old memories, old conversations, old moments I used to think were harmless. And I saw them completely different now, like watching an old movie with brand new eyes. And I started to see how certain people were connected in ways I never questioned before, how certain situations weren't coincidences at all. They were planned. And that kind of truth makes you feel small, makes you feel like you've been walking inside someone else's story without even knowing it. And I sit there sometimes just staring at nothing, trying to accept that parts of my life weren't random at all. They were designed, shaped, controlled. And the more I realized this, the more calm I started to feel. And that sounds crazy, but sometimes the truth don't make you panic. Sometimes it makes you steady, like you finally understand the rules of a game you've been playing blindfolded your whole life. And I stopped asking why this happened to me and started asking how I was going to move forward instead. And that's a powerful shift. Because when you stop feeling like a victim and start thinking like a survivor, your whole energy change. And I walked different, thought different, breathed different, and even the people around me started noticing something was off, but they couldn't tell what. Only that I wasn't the same person anymore. And I started planning things quietly in my head. Not revenge, not exposure, but strategy, control, protection. And it felt strange realizing I was slowly becoming stronger in a situation that was meant to break me. And right when I thought I had finally figured it all out, right when I felt stable for the first time in a long time, something happened that made me realize they weren't done yet.
For a little while, things got way too quiet, and anyone who's lived through real tension knows that silence ain't peace. It's just a storm catching its breath, and that's exactly how it felt. Like the whole world paused just to see what I was going to do next. And I started noticing how folks around me were acting extra normal, extra polite, extra calm. And that's usually the biggest red flag of all. 'Cause when people suddenly start acting perfect, it means they trying to hide the cracks. And I played right along with it. Smiled when I needed to, joked when I needed to, kept my tone light. 'Cause at that point, I understood the power of pretending. And I started feeling oddly calm inside. Not because I was safe, but because I was prepared. And there's a big difference between peace and readiness. And I was ready for whatever came next. And I started organizing my thoughts, lining up everything I'd seen, heard, felt, and noticed over time like pieces of a long, painful puzzle. And this time, instead of panicking, I felt in control. And that messed with me a little, 'cause I didn't recognize this version of myself, the one who wasn't shaking anymore, the one who wasn't scared anymore, the one who could sit in the middle of fake smiles and hidden tension and not lose their mind. And people around me started slipping up more, saying things they wouldn't normally say, getting comfortable, laughing a little too loud, dropping hints without meaning to, and every little slip felt like another level being unlocked in my head. And I started realizing that the truth wasn't something that was going to explode all at once. It was something that was creeping closer and closer with every passing day. And I felt it in my chest. I felt it in my breath. I felt it in the way the air seemed thinner at times. But I didn't react. I just observed, just waited, just prepared. And there's something dangerous about a person who learns how to sit with pain without screaming. And I could see it in their eyes now. They felt it too. They felt the shift. They saw I wasn't weak anymore, that I wasn't confused anymore. But they didn't know how much I knew. And that uncertainty made them nervous. And that made mistakes start happening. And mistakes always lead to truth. And one night, when everything felt calmer than it had any right to feel, when the house felt too quiet and the air felt too still, I realized something that made my whole body freeze. The end of this story wasn't going to be loud, but it was going to be unforgettable. By the time the truth fully settled into my bones, I realized something most people never get to feel.
And that's the kind of quiet strength that comes from surviving something that almost broke you. And it didn't show up with fireworks or shouting or dramatic confrontations. It showed up in silence, in small moments, in the way I started choosing myself instead of begging for answers. And I never walked into a room and exposed anyone, never slammed doors, never threw accusations in faces, because I learned that sometimes the loudest move is the one you never make. And I started moving different, breathing different, loving different, trusting different. And people around me started feeling that shift, even if they didn't understand it. And they'd ask why I seemed so calm, why I wasn't as open as before, why I wasn't so easy to read anymore. And I just smiled because they didn't deserve the truth. And that's a strange kind of peace, realizing not everyone deserves access to your soul. And even now, I never told them what I found. I never told them how far I saw. I never told them how much I understood. And sometimes they look at me like they trying to figure me out, trying to remember when I changed, trying to catch the exact moment I stopped being controllable. But they'll never know, because the scariest part of my story isn't what I discovered. It's what I chose to do with it. And I built a whole new version of myself out of the ashes of that pain. A version that doesn't break easy, doesn't trust blindly, doesn't fold under pressure. And I walk through life now with the kind of awareness that most folks don't have. And it ain't about revenge. It ain't about proving a point. It's about knowing who you are when nobody telling you who to be. And still, even with all this strength, there's a part of this story I keep locked away. A part I'll probably take to my grave. Not because I'm scared, but because it's too powerful to let out. And sometimes, late at night, I think about what would happen if I ever said it out loud, if I ever exposed that final piece of the truth. And every single time, I come to the same conclusion. Some truths ain't meant to be spoken, simply because they change everything once they are.